Well, it's noon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for participating today with Gateway International Group. This is our second webinar in a series that we're sponsoring this academic year. I'm Marty Tillman, a Gateway affiliate and facilitator of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded, as you have to click to get past the reference to that. I'd like to encourage you to now introduce one another through the chat function. Get that going. Let people know where you're coming from, where you're working. Our topic today, as you see here, is advocating for our new reality, strategies for successful internationalization, which our three panelists will discuss with you in the next hour. Short time, so we'll move quickly. Just released IIE Open Doors report is very good news with respect to the large increase in enrollment of international students, but kind of awful with regards to the decline in study abroad to a level not seen, unfortunately, in the last 20 years. Uncertainty continues to surround all the work we do. And we hope our conversation today will provide useful perspective and ideas as you strategize within your institutions to sustain your international commitments. Gateway does offer consulting services, programming support, and information resources to higher ed institutions and organizations around the world. We're structured with three interrelated and mutually supportive divisions: Gateway Solutions, Gateway Learning, and Gateway Resources. And we have a highly experienced team of 60 affiliates and associates that support the work we do in these three areas. So the format today for this discussion is to be a roundtable. Panelists will introduce themselves. I'll ask each one to address a specific question related to the topic. Please drop your questions into the chat feature, and we will do our best to get to as many as we can in this relatively short period of time. After the panelists have spoken in response to particular questions, I'll ask them to respond to as many of your questions as we have time for. And so now I'd like to ask our three panelists, Donna Anderson, Stephen Apayapati, and Richard Johnson, to introduce themselves. Donna?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Donna Anderson. I'm the Senior International Officer and Executive Director of the Global Engagement Office here at the University of Montana in beautiful Missoula. We're a flagship university here and research university, about 10,000 students with a proud history of international engagement, and look forward to our discussion today.
Sorry, and welcome everyone. My name is Stephen Apayapati, as I've been said already. I'm the Director of International Programs at Bucknell University. I've been in the field of international education since 1999, soon after I completed my doctoral degree in educational policy and administration with a specialization in international and intercultural education at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Since then, I have worked in liberal arts colleges and a community college, all in the role of leadership for international education. My work in the field has included leadership in professional organizations, mentoring of new professionals, and presenting and discussing current trends in the field at conferences and forums such as this. Currently at Bucknell University, as I said, a PA in Lewisburg in PA, where I provide leadership in advancing strategic internationalization initiatives, including international partnerships and study abroad program. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. How about Richard?
Thank you, Marty. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for including me in this conversation. My name is Rich Johnson. I'm in my knee-deep, neck-deep in my 25th year as a full-time faculty member in the English department at Harper College, which is a comprehensive community college on the outskirts of Chicago. I primarily teach composition and early British Lit. My PhD is in medieval studies. For the last 12 years, I've had the honor of running our international education program, albeit on half reassigned time. That's, everybody's got to pitch in. And we, since 2014, have had an official Office of International Education with a dedicated space, and I was appointed the director at that time. For the last 2 years, we've had a full-time program assistant, although we're in between assistants right now, but that's been a wonderful addition to our team. I'll be transitioning out this year, and I have a wonderful colleague who I believe might have joined us, Professor Khalil at Harper, who will be the incoming director. Harper College is also, I should mention, a board member college of Community Colleges for International Development, which is the premier organization for community colleges. It's a consortium, if you will, involved in any and all aspects of international education. Our president of Harper College, Dr. Avis Proctor, is the treasurer of the organization, and I have been on the SIO Council for the past 5 years and chair last year and this year. CCID is really sort of an exciting engine for international education at community colleges. We host an annual conference, summer institutes, workshops such as this, and now we're getting ready to launch I'm really excited about this, a leadership academy to build capacity, grassroots capacity among faculty and staff to participate in and lead international education efforts, initiatives on their campuses. So thank you.
Thank you all. I think all of our participants have a good view now of the diversity here on the panel. And now I'm going to move quickly right to the first question and address it to Donna, which is, who are the leading international education stakeholders on your campus?
Yeah, thanks, Marty. So let me just start by acknowledging that I think we all know that as we were in the middle of our global pandemic, internationalization initiatives were not necessarily among the top concerns of our campus leadership. They were needing to focus on economic enrollment numbers, long-term financial viability, staff cuts, restructuring, what have you. And because of this, those of us who were leading those campus internationalization efforts have needed to really take a more active approach to advocacy on our campuses. And part of that new approach has meant involving new and different campus stakeholders in our efforts. I think as campuses now, we are looking ahead to post-pandemic realities, right? We're starting to shift into what this new normal is going to look like. And it's really crucial for advocates of internationalization initiatives to secure a seat at the decision-making tables on our campuses. This is nothing new. We have always needed to have seats at the table, but it's more urgent now. And the voice at that table doesn't always have to be your senior international officer on your campus. For example, here at the University of Montana, last year, our president developed a university design team that was formed to ask how we as a university can best position ourselves for long-term success. And what we did was made sure that we had a strong voice for international initiatives present at the table through not me as SIO, but through the director of our Global Leadership Initiative. And she also happens to serve on our International Council. So it was through her voice that we were able to have that strong presence at that critical moment in time on our campus. We have needed to assure that internationalization efforts remain tied to our institutional mission and priorities, and make sure that doesn't fall off the radar at this time. And here at the University of Montana, our advocacy efforts, which included, of course, more than myself as SIO, have resulted in internationalization being identified as one of the 5 priorities in our strategic initiatives moving forward. So we were able, for example, to embed in that priority global education for all, right? Modeled after UC Davis. I think Florida International, or one of the Florida schools, also has that initiative. Also a more strategic look at how are we going to move forward with our engagement with international student recruitment. So that was really important for us to make sure that was happening, that we were keeping that tied to our mission. And it required other stakeholders, other people than just myself as the SIO. We also need to reach out to new partners on campus and to ensure that inclusive practices we are implementing right now on our campuses will be embedded in ways that they continue even after mobility returns. It's very well established now that the global pandemic revealed and exacerbated inequalities worldwide, unequal access to online education, mobility, vaccines, and it's really given all of us, I hope, pause to reflect on our roles as international educators on our campuses. Many campuses, University of Montana included, have ramped up our virtual exchange and COIL initiatives in response to the limited mobility caused by the pandemic. And we have now seen how the use of virtual exchange and COIL, as well as other forms of internationalization at home, can provide broader and more equitable access to meaningful global education for all students, not just those who can afford to travel. What's going to be a challenge for us here is to find the partners to help us sustain access to those opportunities for our students as mobility returns. I think especially as our resources and our personnel are really stretched to the limit. On our campus, we're starting to reopen education abroad. That's been a huge lift for our education abroad team. And then to have the COIL initiative on top of it has really stretched us thin. So it's through partnerships with the provost office to provide funding to train faculty on the COIL methodology, to provide them with support for instructional design, to provide them with support for finding institutional partners abroad. And also our Office of Organizational Leadership and Development. They have been an instrumental partner and a new partner for us as we move forward with some of these new forms of making access to global education more possible for our students. We have needed to focus on building campus partnerships, which were not always obvious to us. So for example, we have needed to move toward more inclusive and distributed leadership in international education. I do have one slide that kind of demonstrates all of the different partners on campus, if you want to pop that up. And this means partnering with individuals and areas on our campuses that we might not have thought of, such as our Chief Diversity Officer, our Office of Experiential Learning and Career Success, and using the types of leadership that you see here on this slide, so transformational, distributed, and instructional, to help bring in those partners and to do it in a way that is humble, right, and is open to new ways of doing things. This has been especially important as we work to create inclusive campuses, not only for our international students and scholars, but for all students, faculty, and staff in our communities. For example, here at the University of Montana, we have found a wonderful partner in our Director of Inclusive Excellence, Dr. Selena Hill. We've been working with Dr. Hill on efforts for bias incident reporting, supporting inclusive classroom efforts, and working to develop closer relationships with our Black Student Union, KIO Native American Student Association, Pacific Islanders Clubs, and other student groups. We also implemented bi-weekly social justice and identity facilitated discussions within the Global Engagement Office this past year. And through those discussions, we're doing our own identity work and intentionally identifying and addressing policies, procedures, and ways of being that perpetuate inequities in our work. So as we move ahead into our new reality, think about who you are engaging with as partners on your campus, and remember that they may not be obvious to you at first. It's really time to broaden that circle and to look to those other than the usual suspects.
Thanks, Donna. Appreciate it. Stephen, let me turn to you and ask you this question. what are the greatest challenges to sustaining commitment to internationalization on your campus at this time? And how has COVID, this is a very difficult thing to just respond quickly to, but how has COVID especially impacted those challenges for you and your team?
I should always remember to unmute, shouldn't I? Yeah, thank you for this. Is a question that probably can take us all day to really delve deep into. But I will try to mention a few areas of challenge, and then we probably can discuss further when we go to audience questions. I think we probably, one thing that has been, from my experience, not only from my tenure at Bucknell University, but from all other places I've been to, that pose a serious challenge to the practice of international education is understanding of what international education really is. And to begin with, there is so much disproportionate focus on student mobility in most institutions, so much so that the first question that anybody asks you is how many students are going abroad, or how many international students do we have on campus? And once those numbers are rising, everybody thinks everything is okay. But you and I, as practitioners, do know that international education practice is more than that. But that is so deeply ingrained in a lot of minds on our campuses that it's very difficult. It poses some kind of serious challenge to people actually being partners in this process. Once, of course, this past year, COVID has kind of softened that challenge a little bit, because people have come to realize that, hey, without travel and without travel, actually, we still have to continue with education, with international. I was really surprised when I remember the year before COVID actually struck, we were working on a plan to actually advance internationalization on campus. And as soon as COVID hit, the whole general thing was, oh no, we can't do this now. This is not the time for this. We have to pivot to other things that are more urgent. But as soon as the first year passed of COVID, people began to realize, okay, no, this is something more serious. There is something more serious that we need to be attending to in terms of international education than just writing it off as numbers of people who go and come. So that, to me, the kind of understanding and practice of it on campuses poses that intellectual challenge that we always need to address, to find ourselves addressing, trying to address several times. The second thing I will mention today is also about the gap between stated principles and actual practice. And again, that also comes out of that kind of lack of deep understanding of what is involved. So yeah, sure, we want to be able to, internationalize everybody. That is something that we all need to do. But then when the actual bill begins to be compiled, then we realize that the kind of support that is needed to move things forward are not as forthcoming as the desire to do that. Of course, we all understand that on campuses, there are quite a number of projects chasing few dollars. But then the whole reason why people want to internationalize a campus should be at the fore of what needs to be done. And with that understanding, I think this gap will be addressed, the full understanding of why do we want to internationalize and why is it good for us and what does it do to the education of our students. If we are educators, we're educating students to get out, to graduate. How can international education, what is the role of international education for us in that kind of, in the educational mandate that we have for our students. The other thing I want to mention is also centering diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, that comes back to the previous thing of talking about numbers. Again, when we talk about the lack of equity in international education practice or even the access to students, the question talks about just numbers. On my campus, for example, if you take the actual population of, let's say, for lack of a better word, the minority students, their percentage in the general population, compare it to those who study abroad, we probably will pat ourselves on the shoulder. Oh yeah, we've done very well. There are so many, we are way above the curve in this. But in reality, diversity, equity, and inclusion should be more about that. It should not be only about numbers. It should also be about what are the students learning in this process, even those who are the non-minority students who go abroad. What are they engaged in when they go abroad? How does that transform them when they come back, their view of the world, the inequities in the world, and how are they positioned to be able to address some of those things? Those of us who think that international education should be able to address these things find a challenge, in really getting people to fully commit to and understand that these are all parts of international education. And then also there is this question of full access to international education on our campuses. Yeah, we say some campuses, of course, mandate study abroad for all students, and therefore they take that means that, okay, we have 100% access. But well, we all know that it's not all students can be able to do that. But those though that do not even mandate study abroad, for example, our students, what structures do we have on campus that prevent students from actually accessing this opportunity that we have? We on our campus here, we can name a lot of things, some requirements from academic offices, even our athletes who are required to be on campus. How would they be able to access this when they have to use one semester to practice and then another semester to play their games? But they were brought in there to play for that, and they have funds that are attached to their being on campus. So they are in some kind of a catch-22 here. Those are things that, realities that we, as international educators, we face in bringing up to authorities on campus. Access is not there for all students, and that is something we need to address. Now, having talked about all this, probably let me add one more, this thing. The question that probably we need to be asking ourselves and asking our colleagues and all of us who practice this, is international education an end in itself or a means to an end? I believe it's a means to an end. And what is that end? For me, that end is transforming our students to be global citizens. And what does that mean as they graduate and they go? These are, I think, challenges we need to be able to confront and be able to let people on our campuses know. Here at Bucknell University, we have just enrolled in the 19th cohort of the American Council on Education Internationalization Lab. Apparently, that was definitely going to help us to focus on these issues so that we can define as an institution, what are we doing right now, what do we need to do, and where do we need to go with international education. Donna talked very well about stakeholders. I believe that everybody on campus is a stakeholder when it comes to international education. The primary stakeholders, those who are affected directly, and then the leading stakeholders. The leading stakeholders, private international education office, the management and faculty should be able to bring up and talk about international education, or even develop and practice in such a way that the primary stakeholders who will be affected one way or the other would also benefit from it. So generally, we are all stakeholders on campus, but we need to bring everybody to understand their role in that stakeholdership of international education. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your good comments, Stephen. And lastly, Richard, my question for you is, What advocacy strategies have been effective to sustain your campus's commitment to international education?
Thank you, Marty. So this is probably an occupational hazard, but as a medievalist, I'd like to go back to the etymology of the word. And if you think about advocacy, it comes from Latin advocare, literally to add a voice. And so I apologize for the mangled metaphor here, but we've worked hard at Harper to add voices, sort of starting with the choir and then layering the voices from all over campus, faculty, staff, administration, the community, to compose what I hope has become a sort of choral symphony, if you will, of internationalization on campus. And so with that mangled metaphor, Elena, would you please bring up my first slide? Awesome, thank you. So this is our approach, if you will, our itinerary to campus internationalization. We affectionately call the roadmap to the world, and it consists of 3 conceptual coordinates: strategic planning, international mobility, but really the crown jewel, the centerpiece, if you will, is our global region of focus. So we develop a strategic plan on a 5-year cycle that governs and articulates all of our goals and objectives. International mobility is both looking at bringing students in and sending and welcoming faculty to campus, and sending students and faculty overseas as well. The global region of focus, we've been very fortunate to have received recognition from NAFSA with the Senator Paul Simon Spotlight Award in 2018, and then also the IIE Andrew Heiskell Award for Innovation in 2020. So we're very pleased with this approach and think that it's been very productive. Next slide, please, Helena. Thanks. So we launched our first global region of focus back in 2014 after a 2-year strategic planning process. This global region of focus is a 3-year cycle of interdisciplinary studies focused on professional development, campus programs, study abroad, all designed to strengthen undergraduate education in the area of regional focus. And each of the years of the global region has as a particular theme. The first year focuses on professional development. My mantra as Director of International Education has always been, if you want to graduate a globally competent student body, you need to make sure that your faculty are globally minded in their instruction and research. And so obviously with the first year, we focus on the Faculty International Field Seminar, that includes both a coursework component, a project-based curriculum infusion module, and then travel to the region itself. In the second year, we host a visiting faculty lecturer. We've been very fortunate to be able to work with the Fulbright organization and host several faculty on our campus over the past 6 years. Then in the second and third year, we strive to create study abroad experiences and opportunities to the global region of focus for our students. The success of this initiative has really garnered both faculty and administrative support across our campus. The college administration, I think, appreciates the fact that our approach to internationalization is fiscally responsible. It's connected to the college's strategic goals, and it's integrated across campus in a very deliberate and intentional way. Faculty are excited about this initiative. They're able to apply their experiences in our program towards tenure and promotion, and the professional development also provides them with classroom-ready resources to deploy in their disciplines. One measure of our success has also been, I think, that faculty participation in our programs, whether it's the Faculty International Field Seminar or our professional development workshops, has increased consistently over the last 8 years. But probably most importantly to all of us as faculty, as educators, has been the data that demonstrates that students are indeed gaining that international perspective, that global mindedness across the curricula that we offer at the college. So we've found that students who take our globalized courses persist and graduate at rates approximately 6 to 10% higher than average. And then finally, I would point to 3 other areas of our sort of integration and advocacy strategy, if you will, to permeate the culture, the climate of the campus. The first is global learning outcomes and assessment. Our office has adopted 6 outcomes that intend and aim at promoting awareness of and respect for the uniqueness and plurality of identities of groups and societies making up all humankind. And these global learning outcomes are actually embedded in our graduation, our World Cultures and Diversity graduation requirement that is required of all graduating students. We also offer what we call the Global Scholars Distinction. And this is a graduation honor that appears on a student's transcript and reflects coursework and also a project. And it's designed obviously to promote, acknowledge, and reward individual students' life-changing, transformational intercultural growth through their studies at the college. And then everyone has mentioned, obviously, the centrality and importance of social justice. We began in 2018, our office co-created and has co-facilitated since then with the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, a professional development opportunity that we call the Social Justice Leadership Certificate Program. And this is a year-long project-based program that's aimed at building, employee capacity to lead and support diversity-oriented social justice initiatives on campus. So that's just a quick sort of breathless race through some of the ways that we've tried to point at, centralize, and advocate for internationalization on our campus, Marty.
Yeah, sorry, you have another minute or two if you'd like to continue to expand on anything.
Okay, so going back to those impact numbers, I think it's really important to count everything. This has also been one of my mantras. Especially as a half reassigned time faculty person trying to promote these initiatives on campus, I've always gone by the adage that if you don't count it, nobody knows it or sees it. It's sort of a variation, if you will, of Donna's metaphor about being at the table. I think it was Elizabeth Warren who said, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. So we try to count everything and really demonstrate the impact and value of our initiatives to the administration. And if we think about just the first two iterations of our global region of focus, the 2014 to 2017 focus on Africa and the 2017 to 2020 focus on Latin America, 8,035 students were impacted by various programs, presentations, workshops, guest lectures over the course of those two iterations. And that's a huge impact. Nearly 100 students through this program also participated in 13 different study abroad programs to the global region of focus. That's not counting students who participated in other consortium-based or vendor-based programs. That's just faculty-led programs to the region itself. Well, of course, then COVID hit. We had 4 faculty-led programs that had an approximate enrollment of 50 to 60 students that were canceled due to the pandemic. And then if we count up all the faculty who participated in these programs, we have 32 faculty from 16 different departments representing all 4 divisions of our college, both transfer and career programs who've participated in our programs. And if you think about the number of students that they impact in any given year, there is this ripple effect of our organizational structure on the culture and climate of the campus.
Thanks, Richard. Stephen, do you have anything you'd like to add on about DEI issues and mobility to what Rich just said?
Well, from what I think my quick mention about, DEI being very essential and the need to move from just numbers to actual practice is something I would always want to emphasize, that to me, we need to fully understand, again, what is it that we want students to know regarding DEI and its practice and its impact on their lives and through their own practice. And I think that we at Bucknell, we have DEI in various offices. There is a coordinating council that was formed recently to Bucknell Engaged Coordinating Council. What is supposed to be to bring students and faculty and staff and everybody coming together talking about how do you engage each other on campus and what would be the relevance of that. So the for people to be able to engage each other here. And since we have a mix of different nationalities here on campus, it is just a microcosm of the world that should extend to what we do and how do we learn all some of those things when we go outside, travel to other places, and how do we import those things to campus. So there is a big mix, which, you know, we have to continue to push as we go along. Yeah.
I know a lot of people, let me ask all my panelists here, you know, I have this thought that I think COVID has created a new, a renewal of interest in dialogue and DEI out of necessity, if you will, right? Because of the limitations on the usual way we look at mobility. My question is, do you think it's transformative what we're doing now, or will we return back when there's some new normal around COVID and we seem to be out of the woods on it? Do you think this dialogue, this focus will be more purposeful going forward in a more systematic way, or not? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll jump in. I do think that the tendency, I think the intentions are good. I think some campuses will probably be more successful in continuing with what they either have started or already had going before COVID. But I think there's always going to be that pressure to, you know, count the numbers, right? Count the number of students going out, count the number of students coming in. What we need to do, and maybe Open Doors can help us do this, because I know that they're now starting to count international students who are doing remote coursework in the Open Doors report. I think that's a good step. That let's take the focus off of purely mobility and also look at other ways that we're engaging with global education. So maybe by also including how many students are engaging in virtual exchange, or like the wonderful programs that Richard just outlined that are internationalization at home programs embedded into the general education coursework. So I think unless it's embedded, the tendency is going to be to go back to where we were.
Yeah.
Thanks, Donna. Okay, so we have like 25 minutes remaining or so. And we're going to open up now to the questions that we received prior to this hour. We got maybe a dozen or so, and then there are one or two that have been added in just recently from you. I'd like to open up to ask our panel to look at two questions that came in early, which have to do with the terms of buy-in and rallying support, which to me are synonymous, really, I think, at what is the perennial issue of getting folks to pay attention, to listen carefully, look at best practices in terms of their internationalization commitments on paper, if you will. So what do you three think about this? What do you see a new attention being paid, or do you think that because of the severity of fiscal issues that have been raised, et cetera, there's a retrenchment on paying attention to internationalization and so forth? Anybody?
Yeah, let me chip in here just briefly. I think the urgency is there that we need to do something. What can be done is probably first and foremost to us as practitioners of international education on our various campuses. And there's one thing that we can't do, that is give up at some point that people are not listening. I did talk about Bucknell being in joining the American Council on Education Internationalization Lab this year. Well, we started talking about this 8 years ago through many different proposals and through different administrations, and each one, yeah, okay, but next, okay, until we found somebody this time around who is fully accepting of it and fully want to support it. and then it goes. So the talking has to continue to go on. It can't stop. But we all know very well that our students cannot fully be prepared for the 21st century world without being embedded in international education on campus, abroad, or whatever they do. Their employability in the world, it depends on how much global-minded they have become by the time they graduate. And we need to be relentless in doing that.
Other thoughts? Donna, Rich, want to build on that?
Sure, I would sort of riff off of both of those ideas that Donna and Stephen presented. I mean, there are always going to be these pockets of resistance, if you will, of intransigence to whether it's DEI initiatives or DEIJ initiatives or internationalization issues. And so one of the things that I think we've tried to do is really put ourselves in the place of those colleagues whom we're trying to reach and imagine what it is that motivates them and appealing to them, you know, sort of along those old sort of classical rhetorical strategies, like how are we going to appeal to our audience? And as a faculty person, I know that working with our faculty senate, with our faculty leadership, thinking about ways in which we can incentivize participation. And it sounds sort of carrot and stickish, but in a way, once you get them in the door, they are excited, they are mobilized and invested in these initiatives. And so part of it is just getting them in the door, providing them with the tools and resources to be able to incorporate these in their own classes and demonstrating the value of it. So yes, I said count everything, but the reason I mentioned our global learning outcomes is that the next phase of this, it's not just about graduation or persistence from fall to spring or spring to fall or fall to fall, but really it's about have they acquired the knowledge, skills, and attitudes associated with those learning outcomes. So the next phase, and we're just kind of in the infancy of this, the next phase is to really assess whether those global learning outcomes are having an impact on our students' mindsets, if you will. And I think appealing to faculty, getting faculty involved in those initiatives is key. And once they are intrigued, once they recognize the value of it, once you can demonstrate the impact, I've found anyways at Harper that they join.
Thanks, Rich.
And I'll just echo actually both what Stephen and Richard have said, but particularly I'm feeling like this learning how to speak the language of others, right? So, you know, when I'm getting ready for a meeting with our CFO, I'm absolutely going to frame it in language that I think is going to resonate with him. So speaking the language of others, and then just that instructional leadership, which Tim Janssen and I talked about in our IIE publication, right? And Richard, you alluded to, you know, give faculty, give other partners on campus the tools that they need so that they can move forward with these initiatives. I mean, COIL is a great example for campuses that have set up a good workshop system. Make it simple for faculty to go through maybe a self-paced training, provide them with a stipend so they can construct this course, provide them with instructional design support, and help them find a good and willing partner. I think that's a good example of how you can really incentivize it for others.
Yeah, I would just like to add in, a few years back, I've been in touch and went down to the University of Florida. There is a member of the senior staff there named Paloma Rodriguez. Paloma has produced terrific material about COIL. You're all nodding your heads. Good. I'm glad to see that. I had a really good time on that campus, but Paloma's work is really quite outstanding. Okay, so Heidi, do you want to jump in with this question from Carl?
Absolutely. Thank you all. It's been a wonderful discussion so far. One of our attendees asked if the panelists could address how internationalization should be reflected in business administration curriculum and whether you have engaged in that endeavor on your campus.
I'll jump in because I believe Carl is a colleague at Harper. And thank you, Carl. It's an excellent question. And one of the ways that we've done it is, speaking of virtual exchange or virtual opportunities or COIL, however you want to frame that transition away from the sort of traditional geographic and travel-oriented coordinates of study abroad. Really, things like IREX, the global I'm going to get the Global Sustainability Challenge, Solia Connect, and those various opportunities. They provide faculty with an infrastructure, and IREX in particular is very well suited to the business management curriculum.
I think the brief thing I would add is it's all about outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. Because classes and courses and all those things are just there, but what do you want out of it? And I think if the faculty member who is teaching a particular business course or anything wants to delineate the particular outcomes they want to get in the course, then that would be the first step to see what resources do I need to bring into the classroom for them to have this kind of outcome, and then how do I assess to be sure that the students have actually got this kind of outcome. So it's assessment and then actually spending time to tease out the kind of outcomes that you want for the class.
Right. Thanks, Steve. Donna, do you want to have a final say on this one, or should we move on?
No, I think you can. I think you can move on. I do think, however, I've found in the various campuses I've worked on, so I was at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville prior to coming to Montana, and then before that I was at Loras College, one of the small privates in Iowa. I have found our business faculty at all three institutions and institutional types to be some very excellent partners with international education. So I think that's one advantage that business in general has, is that it's very conducive to international integration into its curriculum. And many of those faculty are already doing international engagement. So it's more about providing tools and helping them enhance.
Thanks. So guys, I would like to focus on a question that came in earlier. It's about meeting pent-up demand, however that might be interpreted on your individual campuses, if you will. How pent-up is it really? And how do you see now, how do you assess renewed interest in virtual internships, for example, in opposition to the original premise that, well, everything would be live abroad, you know? So whether it's virtual internships to combat the fact that we can't go, and I'd like to also have anybody comment on what's going on at home. How is internationalization at home? Has it become, is it receiving renewed attention, if you will, right? For service learning, for example, in your home community, in your state. Any thoughts on that? Go for it.
I'll jump in real quick. And I don't have a lot to share here because I don't feel like I have great examples of, I'd love to be able to say, oh, our internationalization at home just took off during COVID and it's here to stay. I think we've had limited success. And I think, honestly, to be very honest, I think that a lot of the internationalization that at home that took place during COVID was out of necessity, and it was part of that pent up demand, or the demand where now I can't go abroad. So what's the next best thing? So we were doing, on our campus, we were doing a lot of partnering at that point with our experiential learning office, who managed the National Student Exchange. So they were looking for, well, could we get the student up to Canada, to a French speaking Canada, or to Puerto Rico for Spanish, or, you know, something domestic that at least has the cultural immersion component. So I guess I'm just throwing that out as the reality on this campus was that it was happening. I think it's going to be a struggle to continue to make it happen, to keep it embedded, because everybody is very excited to have mobility again. So I'm hoping that either Stephen or Richard will have some good examples though.
Well, what I have here, yeah, in terms of study away, what they call them, the internal home study abroad at home, we definitely something that we have really just focused on. No, I should take that back. We are refocusing on that. We have some programs already that, away from campus within the US that some of our students do go to. But we see the urgency now to begin to increase that, because even in the height of COVID, people could still move within the country and people could move to other places. Students could move to other university campuses to do that. So if we open access to that and opportunity and open the opportunities, definitely we'll get more students. And actually, I'm saying this, in particular reference to Bucknell University, which is a rural area in the heart of Pennsylvania. If you live here all your life and you spend a semester in Washington, D.C., for example, it will feel like a whole different country for you, which is, another way of learning about things. So that definitely, yeah, that is a way to go. The virtual one, good as it is, and I think it is supposed, for me, what I see virtual component to internationalization here is it opens up for more opportunities. For all students. But we must be careful also that we do not use it to kind of separate the haves from the have-nots. Those who are not able to travel, this is yours. And those who are able to travel, this is yours. Whatever plan we put on campuses should be that both are available to as many students as possible, because there are benefits in both using both routes for international education.
I would just add and agree wholeheartedly with that. We don't want to create this sort of segregated system. One of the ways that we've worked towards that is turning towards our foundation, towards donors, and thinking about ways that we can provide resources, as we mentioned about faculty, but also to students, so that they're able to participate and take advantage of these unique opportunities that we've been creating. In terms of sort of internationalization at home, we've had it's sort of in fits and starts. We've had a couple of students who wanted to spend a semester in very major discipline specific courses that we're not particularly strong on, but then they return. And so it's a reverse transfer situation. And we've also had in the past a sort of a social work certificate program doing local service learning and those kinds of things, or expeditions to Atlanta, for example, and other places associated with the civil rights movement. But it's really been sort of in fits and starts, and we haven't thought of it in a coherent way. Now, because of the pandemic, really, and a transition in leadership and a transition, if you will, a shift in our moral compass on campus towards social justice, equity, and inclusion, we're really sort of thinking about what service learning means. And one of the conversations we're having now is, what do we mean when we refer to service learning? What's the difference between service learning and volunteerism? How can the impact be generated from the community as equal partners, and really thinking about that in a meaningful way? And there's a wonderful sociologist up at University of Wisconsin-Madison, Randy Stoker, who's sort of written about that in a brilliant way. I've applied that to some service study abroad programs in the past, and it's a really great sort of metric, if you will, about avoiding that kind of north-south dynamic, first world, and those kinds of power dynamics that end up really polluting the experience and perhaps reinforcing the stereotypes, biases, and prejudices that we're trying to eradicate.
I'm going to take that as a cue, Richard. I have a long history in the service learning field. I just want to say to those who are still on the chat and listening, there is a tremendous archive on service learning at Stanford University. And if anybody wants the link to that, please write me. I'm happy to share that. And I had contributed recently a bibliography on pioneers and in service learning in the field for the new NAFSA MIG, the Member Interest Group on International Service Learning. So if you go there online, you can find that bibliography. Okay. The last few minutes, what I'd like to ask here is a big, very broad question to all three of you. And that is, reflect for a minute on what you think will change permanently in the way that you go about your work on campus as a result of COVID. You know, that is, as you think of the next few years, forget about the science for a second. I mean, just what's your intuition about this?
So the first thing that pops into my head is I do think our international travel review process is probably forever changed. So we have, out of necessity, right, our International Travel Review Committee has really had to move to a much more robust, multifactorial review process, looking at everything from, you know, not just CDC and DOS information, but all sorts of metrics that are out there to help us determine where is it a good risk to have members of our community traveling to, and to what extent can our partners abroad, take care of them. And so I think that's one thing that is for sure forever changed, at least for the foreseeable future, because COVID is here to stay. It will probably morph into whatever its new normal is. But that's a very simple example. And it also required us talking of stakeholders to really expand out. We had to pull in one of our epidemiologists onto that committee, someone from our legal counsel office. We already had someone from risk management in our health center, but that was a heavy lift, and it's probably here to stay.
Stephen, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, okay. Let me get briefly, and then you can conclude there. I think, Donna said it. To me, health and safety, the focus, deep focus on health and safety is going to be front and center of everything we do. Yes, study abroad by travel will continue. People would ask for it, and we'll continue to plan to do it. COVID or no COVID or another pandemic, but we have to be able to build structures that would make us very nimble enough to work around pandemics and continue to do what we need to be able to do. It's just something we have to begin to live with from now on.
Thanks very much. Rich, if you could be brief, because there is one final question on this.
Absolutely. I would just add, in the same way that instructors have had to sort of become adept at asynchronous instruction, I think there are certain functions of our offices and our areas that can take on this blended character. There's some things that we used to do face-to-face or on paper and those sorts of things that could transition to this new e-universe, if you will.
Great. Any last, here's a comment, question. It has to do with managing with small staff. Is it going to be something that I heard someone on the TV comment on this about the rising prices in the supermarket, and the guy said to the interviewer, well, once we raise prices, we ain't going back to lower ones. And so, I mean, but it's like the obverse is, well, once once the senior staff on your campus sees that you're doing work, with one or two fewer staff, it's not likely they're going to come to you in a year and say, hey, would you like to have those folks back? So what's going on there?
Let me quickly add that it's part of the whole plan. You may be probably a one-person office or two or just 2 or 3 staff, but I think how your university functions, there are positions that you can tap into and allies that you can draft into your office. I'm talking about health and safety, for example. I'm sure every campus has a risk manager. Now, if the risk manager has not been involved in international risk, this is the time for you to pull them in and say, hey, even the ERMIA, the risk management organization, has an international component. We need you here. We need you, and pull people in to get it going.
You're muted, Marty, I think.
Martin, you are muted.
Well, I took time, sorry. I was just saying, I don't know if we can carry on a few minutes past 1 or not on the call. So I think the safest thing is to say thank you to everybody who has stayed with us here. And I hope that my colleagues have offered some useful perspectives. Here is, yes, the contact information for those you've heard talk. It's been great to have Stephen, Donna, and Richard with us. Very different perspectives, different campuses. And I hope you'll stay in touch, those of you who are listening, with what Gateway is doing and and you see here what the resources are. In particular, go to that resource section. You may find things there that you can find of practical use on your campus. And again, I admire the work that you all are doing. I know how tough it's been, and let's hope it's going to be easier in the coming year. So thank you again for being with us.